The Stanford Prison Experiment, when ordinary people become guards and prisoners. In the summer of 1971, a psychological experiment conducted at Stanford University would become one of the most famous and controversial studies in the history of social science. Known as the Stanford Prison Experiment, it sought to answer a disturbing question: how easily can ordinary people become cruel when placed in positions of power? The experiment was designed and led by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who wanted to investigate how social roles influence human behavior. At the time, many psychologists believed that abusive behavior in prisons was mainly the result of the personalities of the guards or prisoners themselves. Zimbardo suspected something different. Perhaps the situation and the roles people are assigned could dramatically shape how they act. To test this idea, Zimbardo and his colleagues created a simulated prison in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department. They recruited 24 healthy male college students who had passed psychological screening and were considered emotionally stable. The students were randomly divided into two groups, guards and prisoners. The experiment was planned to last 2 weeks. However, it would end after only 6 days. The prisoners were treated as if they had actually committed crimes. In fact, local police cooperated with the researchers and carried out staged arrests at the students' homes. The prisoners were handcuffed, searched, and taken to the mock prison. There, they were stripped, given prison uniforms, and assigned identification numbers. From that moment on, they were referred to only by their numbers, not their names. Meanwhile, the guards were given uniforms, mirrored sunglasses, and wooden batons. They were instructed to maintain order in the prison but were not given specific rules about how to treat the prisoners. The researchers wanted to see what kind of behavior would emerge naturally. What happened next shocked everyone involved. Within a very short time, the guards began to display increasingly authoritarian and sometimes cruel behavior. Some guards invented humiliating punishments, such as forcing prisoners to do endless push-ups, cleaning toilets with their bare hands, or standing for long periods without rest. They also used psychological tactics, including sleep deprivation and verbal harassment. Perhaps even more surprising was the reaction of the prisoners. Many became passive, anxious, and emotionally distressed. Some prisoners experienced severe stress, crying uncontrollably or showing signs of depression. One participant suffered such intense emotional breakdowns that he had to be released from the experiment after only 36 hours. The power of the situation seemed to transform both groups. The guards began to identify strongly with their authority, while the prisoners increasingly behaved like submissive inmates. Even Zimbardo himself became deeply involved in the roles of the simulation. Acting as the prison superintendent, he initially failed to recognize how harmful the situation had become. The experiment might have continued much longer if not for the intervention of Christina Maslach, a graduate student who later became Zimbardo's wife. After observing the treatment of the prisoners, she strongly objected, arguing that the experiment had gone too far. Her criticism prompted Zimbardo to stop the study immediately. The Stanford Prison Experiment quickly became a powerful illustration of how situational forces can shape human behavior. It suggested that under certain conditions, ordinary people might commit acts they would normally consider unacceptable. The study has often been used to explain real-world events, such as abuses in prisons or military settings. For example, commentators frequently reference the experiment when discussing the prisoner abuse scandal at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq in 2004. However, in recent years the experiment has also faced significant criticism. Some researchers argue that the guards were subtly encouraged to behave harshly, meaning their actions may not have emerged naturally. Others question whether the findings can be generalized to real-life situations. Ethical concerns have also been raised, particularly regarding the intense psychological stress experienced by participants. Despite these criticisms, the Stanford Prison Experiment remains one of the most widely discussed studies in psychology. It continues to provoke important questions about power, authority, and the fragile boundary between civilization and cruelty. More than 50 years later, its central lesson still resonates. Under the right circumstances, the roles we play may shape us far more than we realize.